Please take just one. I was 13 years old when I stopped trick-or-treating. The other kids weren't so eager to give up free candy, but something happened that year. Something awful. My friends, Owen, Drew and I were out trekking for candy when we came to a house that had a big bowl of it sitting on the porch. A sign above it read, "Please take just one." We joked about swiping it all, but Owen and Drew only took a few each, enough to make them feel like badass kids. I'd always been afraid to take more than one because I was intimidated by authority. Sure, it was just a sign, and it usually meant that the owner wasn't home. But I was a timid kid who always did what he was told. Owen and Drew explained how that house did the same thing every year, and that people rarely saw the guy who lived there. They dared me to do what they were too chicken to, so I decided to see what it felt like to do something naughty. We looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I poured the contents of the bowl into my bag. The three of us ran down the street laughing and shoving each other. Part of me expected someone to chase after us. In hindsight, I was right to be concerned. At Owen's house, we dumped out and sorted all of our yummy treasures. I tried to offer him and Drew some of the contraband candy, but they refused. I remember Owen saying, "That's all you, dude," and Drew shouting, "I don't want your tainted treats." Granted, they weren't entirely serious, but I was annoyed that they weren't sharing in the responsibility, enough to go home instead of a sleepover. That night I was torn from a sugar-fueled dream by a hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. The skin was rough and the blade was ice cold. It was just slightly pressing into my skin, ready to slit my throat at a moment's notice. My body went stiff. I wanted to scream, but then a gruff voice whispered, "Don't make a fucking sound." At first I didn't realise what was happening. Were we being burglarised? Then I got my answer. "Can't you read, you little shit?" The sign said, "Just one. Just fucking one." I'll never forget those words, and the sickening smell of his breath. He went on to explain how every year he would catch kids taking 2 or 3 pieces of candy, which always infuriated him. It wasn't until I took the entire bowl that he finally snapped. Why did I do something so stupid? I was terrified and humiliated at the same time. "You like candy, you little shit?" he asked me, so I shook my head as much as I could, despite his hand pressing against my face. He then removed it, still holding the knife to my neck, and proceeded to shove unwrapped candy into my mouth. I tried not to inhale, but I couldn't help it. I could feel things pushing against the back of my throat as I whimpered and drooled. I started to gag, but he put his hand back over my mouth so I wouldn't cough anything up. I truly believed I was going to die, and I feared for my friends as well. My short life flashed quickly before my eyes. All I could think in that moment was, How could an adult hate children so much? Everything I presumed about them was suddenly a lie. They weren't infallible, and their authority wasn't always law. Fine, so I took all this guy's candy. Did I really deserve to die? As I contemplated this for the first time, expecting to suffocate to death, my father rushed into the room, grabbed my metal desk chair, and beat the living daylights out of the guy. I never loved my dad so much as I did that night. I'm an adult now, and I live alone in a nice house on a quiet street with lots of kids. Every Halloween, I leave a basket on my front stoop, full of candy, with a sign that reads, "Take as many as you want." Too early to trick or treat. I'm in desperate need of help. If anyone reading this could please give me some insight, it would be greatly appreciated. I'm aware that some or most of you may be hardcore horror fans like myself. That's why I'm coming to you with a serious problem. I've always been a fan of horror. I always enjoy a good jump scare or a creepy feeling to keep me up. However, what I have been going through for the past 10 years is something I can't understand. I'm a 40-year-old man, I'm happily married, and I have 3 children who all go to different universities. Every year my wife and I would get extremely excited around the fall season. The reason for that is particularly because we both love Halloween. We would always spend a good few grand on decorations and candy. We were known as the go-to house in our neighbourhood for scoring a motherload of delicious treats. However, as I mentioned, something strange occurred 10 years ago. One night, my wife and I were enjoying a little quality time together when we got an unexpected knock at the door. I answered it and was nearly knocked off my feet from the sudden scare. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a large person in a yellow rabbit costume. They looked like a mascot. At close examination, the costume was a little unsettling. The head of the costume contained massive, cartoon eyes and ears that were quite long. The whole costume was pretty impressive. It looked like one of those full-body costumes. You couldn't just find it in a store. It was like one of those suits you would have to pay a pretty penny for online. The bunny held a small jack-o'-lantern bucket in his hands. He proceeded to hold it forward without saying a word. This is where the problem comes in. This happened in the early part of September. As you could imagine, we didn't have any candy to give the poor fellow. I didn't want to be rude. I thought this could have been a confused person. There was no way it was a child. The person was huge. They had to have been at least 6.5 feet. I'm sorry. It's a little bit too early for treats. Why don't you come back in October? We'll definitely have something for you then, I said. The bunny simply looked down into his empty bucket, turned his back and skipped along down the street Naturally, we found the situation quite bizarre. This wouldn't necessarily be a cry for help if it ended there. The next time, it was late in December. Snow was practically pelting down on the town. That's when we received a knock at the door. I answered and was greeted by the bunny-suited individual again. The suit looked visibly dirty, as if it hadn't been taken off in who knows how long. The funny thing is, this person never came to my house on October 31st. Not a single time. I tried to be nice again and told the person there was no candy. I also told him he should probably find some shelter from the blizzard. There was no way I was letting him in my house. The next time it happened was in the middle of January. At this point, I was quite frankly getting a little bit irritated and uncomfortable. I even informed the local authorities of this guy. I could legally say he was harassing me and my house. All these years, the police never came up with anything. I let this go on for 5 years before we decided to move. One time I even answered the door with my gun and threatened violence. Apparently that didn't intimidate him in the slightest. After we moved out, about 2 miles on the other side of town, we thought it was over. For a few months nothing happened, until one day I got a knock at the door. I didn't think it would be him, because everything seemed fine. We didn't have any problems for a while. However, when I answered, it was surely the costumed rabbit person again. His costume was completely filthy. I could see large accumulations of dust and spider webs. I could even see little spiders crawling over his body. It was as if the costume was beginning to rot. No matter how many times I threatened violence or snapped on the guy, he would always come back. This is what I need help with. A few days ago, he came back. I was reluctant to answer the door. It never worked before anyway. This time when I answered, I could see splats of dried red substance along his mouth and torso. I just wanted this encounter to be over with, so I reached into my pocket and handed him some peppermints. Surprisingly, he shook his head to say no. I have to admit that I'm stupid. For the first time in 10 years, I asked him the question I never thought to ask. What do you want? His body went still for a few seconds. Then he extended his bucket towards me and gestured for me to look inside. I nearly vomited at the sight. Inside his bucket there was a heart. For my own conscience, I chose to believe it wasn't a human heart, but I have doubts. In an act of defense, I punched the bunny right in his face. His soft cotton head went flying into my front lawn. What I saw then has kept me up ever since. Under the mask, there was nothing. There was no person. It was just empty. I looked over in the yard at the discarded head. I swear for a split second I saw the head blink. Before I could even process what was happening, the body ran towards the head. It picked up its head and ran at an inhuman speed. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. I could honestly use some help. I've gone to the police. I've gone to my kids. Everyone thinks my wife and I are crazy. I'm desperate for help. I'm afraid that my life and that of my wife are on the line. Why? Because this morning something was written on my front door. See you on Halloween for one last time. I'm taking that as a threat. We've already decided that we'll be leaving town for Halloween. I don't know if it will matter. What if it finds us like it did the first time? Why is it coming for us? What the hell even is it? If anyone has any solution or answers, please let me know. Halloween is quickly approaching. We're running out of time. And if a big yellow rabbit comes to your door on Halloween or any time, slam the door in its fucking face. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video and click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.